right, at several occasions, we most times feel that politics is a no man's. In fact, I can't even say no man's business. It's a one man's business. No, it's a business that has to concern you and I. It's a business that concerns every Tom, Dick, and Harry. It's a business that you don't need to live for one set of people. That, on the other hand, you will end up turning around to cast blames that I blame the government, I blame this, I blame that. If I'm to ask who is the government, if you check even the study of government that you were given in the secondary school, you would understand that government revolves around you and I. That's why I don't want to take politics today, the discourse of politics today, that's so far, but I have to like bring it to you and I. And by bringing it to you and I mean especially the youth of today. You understand the fact that most times when we want to think about how to grow um, Nigeria to the dream that we want it to be, we feel it should be left in the hands of those who are already growing it. But today, I had to like go down to bring a wonderful person who has tested the waters and he's still testing the waters the more. And aside from testing these waters, most times it has to be challenging that, sometimes when you want to check the age of those who are called youth in Nigeria, you agree with me that even the oldies are called youths, especially when it has to do with political one or two. Here, we would stress a whole lot about that. That's why I have to like bring in somebody who is under his 30s. Don't mind the chubbiness and the growth on his cheek. As I speak with you, he is the state coordinator and also the director of special duties nationally, Southern Nigeria Youth Congress. Yes, you can even see that on his cap. And as I
Thank
speak
you.
with you, he's bringing that to Akwa Ibom State, where he comes from. And aside from being that, he is also the country director, Project Sprint. When we get down to that side, he would explain what Project Sprint really is. And aside that, he's the legislative assistant to the federal House member representing Abak Etimekpo, Ika Federal Constituency, in the person of Honorable Clement Jimbo. He's an agriculturist. That's one thing I knew him for right from inception. And he loves that. He loves that. So irrespective of politics, you also have to understand the fact that you need to at least half where you come from too. I don't need to also make you not know that he is a one-time house state house aspirant contesting for Abak State House of Assembly under the umbrella of
The APC.
the APC. Challenging to you. So at this juncture, I have to present to you Mr.
Thank you.
Israel James. Israel James, welcome to
Thank
DARA
you.
Africa.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Now,
Versus.
first of all, let's start with the fact that youths really wants to delve more into politics. How do you balance politics with the youths, especially that of let me say that of nowadays?
There is nothing to balance for the young people.
Okay.
Um, I've actually had this narration that it's as simple as possible. You first have to have that mindset of responsibility. So when you see things not going well the way they should, it takes responsibility for you to ask, why is this thing not functioning the way it should? I use myself, my experience, my personal experience, for example. I traveled to my home place. We
Okay.
weren't raised here in Akwa Ibom State,
Okay.
but the first time I traveled to my place in Akwa Ibom, I figured something different. There was this shift I noticed, which was the roads were so narrow, bush tracks across each path. So for someone coming from the city and the town, I had to ask some questions. Why
Okay.
are those things not there? Why is it different? Why don't we have roads as a young person at the time? And
At
then
that
at
time,
that
not
time, not
now.
even now, I was quite tender. So I asked, for a child, I was very curious. I used to ask a lot of questions. Even till now, I still
Even
do.
till now, I want to stress it
I
that.
still do ask questions. So I asked, what's different? They say, okay, the people in government here are not doing what the government did. I'm like, what is government? So I started asking questions. And I found out that the bulk of what we need to do to change society is in the corridors of democracy
Yeah.
and politics. And so when you take that responsibility, you know you owe that to yourself, you owe that to your country, you owe it to your state and to your community. So you have to roll your sleeves and participate. One of the things I try to see how to encourage young people to understand is that most of the works you're doing in NGOs, giving back to communities, the rippling effect of that is very minute. The bulk of the work and the change you want to see can be done in the corridors or in the pages of democracy if you really pay attention to it and find a way to use democracy to work for your community, your states, and your country at large.
Now, talking about paying attention to, and should I use the word paying attention? Let's say using democracy to develop your state, your country, your community, and a whole lot.
Yes.
At several occasions, the youth see it to be challenging that the elders don't give them the opportunity to excel.
Well,
How true is
that's a
this?
different school of thought. Especially, I don't like to associate myself with that school of thought. I mean, look at me. I'm an example of telling you that I can do things and I don't have to wait for someone. So that idea is, permit me to say, an apologies to anyone listening. It's actually a lazy school of thought. So do you want someone
Kind
to
of
take
inferiority
something from
complexity.
you? So someone to take something and just hand it over to you? When you grow as a child, when you grow up, if you don't take responsibilities or do some things or take up initiative to handle things by yourself, your parents would not trust you to do that. You see, so you look at the party structure, political party structures across all parties, you find out that the number of young people who are in that place or actively committed there is very significant. It's highly insignificant, very low. They are even trying to encourage, or they are even creating a niche for them to even beg them to come in. You say, okay, the youths of so 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 and so party. I mean, look at the demographics of the Nigerian population. Young people contribute largely to that, over
That's
sixty
true. That's
percent.
true.
So why are they not infiltrating those structures? So you don't expect someone to invest his time, his energy, resources into the political structures and then just take it over and hand it over to you. That's power we are talking about. And the idea of wielding power is that you have to take it. It's never handed over to anybody. So young people want a situation, almost a near classical situation where it is being handed over to them on the table. But it's not possible. It's unimaginable to think that way. The only person that these people are going to hand over such powers to are their in-laws, their sons, or maybe their close relative, or someone they are willing to put in there as a stooge. But for we, the real young people, to be able to, get into it, I have to quote Nasser
El Rufai.
Erufai, where he said that they have to roll your sleeves and get dirty, get involved in the system. Politics controls almost every aspect of our life. So if you're not awakened yet to that responsibility, I think the best word to describe you is that you are sleeping.
Okay, talking about sleeping, I have to get back to the lane of history.
Yes.
And now the least I would love to make you understand and remember too is that even Nigeria's independence was gotten by the
By
youths
young people.
because by then Namdi Azikiwe, Tafawa Balewa, and
They
all
were in
others
their
were
early
youths.
30s.
Yes, they were in their early 30s, just like you've mentioned. But if you look at just like you've mentioned here, that at some occasions when if the youths choose to sleep over, and what would happen to them would be waking up to see politics or political powers being handed over to sons,
Yes,
relatives,
it now
and all
becomes a
others.
family business.
It becomes a family business, or
Yes.
sometimes even handed over to a stooge
A
who they would
stooge who they can
control.
trust.
Now,
Yes.
on the other hand, considering how the contemporary system is, especially talking about the just concluded general elections, it could just like you stood out to contest. A lot of things happened that at the end of the day, what ended up happening is we producing a larger number of the oldies instead of the youth. And sometimes the youths were kind of I don't know. You were in the race. What really happened? Let's
Well,
start from
if you
there.
want to use my own story to give an example, I would say that was my first time to
Okay.
run for office. I'm not saying
Okay.
people don't run for the first time and win,
Okay.
but that was my first introduction into a structure that I was very much not well aware of. Secondly, When I got into that system, I didn't
Mm.
find as much young persons as myself in there who could relate to what I was the information I was trying to convey at the time, my school of thought, my idea at that point. And so that was one of the first challenge I met in the political system. I was faced with old dogs.
Now
And
the
then
young.
you can't teach old dogs new tricks. And
Mm.
I am evolutionary in thinking. I don't the status quo of things that we have currently has kept us where we are right now.
Mm.
So when you come with an evolutionary mindset, you are scaring old dogs.
Mm.
You're forcing them, you're trying to bend them. But if we had more new dogs in the system,
Mm.
you could easily communicate and experiment on the idea and see how we can forge a better path for our state constituency and the state at large. So that's one of the challenges. Another challenge I faced was the party structure was quite new to myself also
Okay.
too.
Okay.
So I wouldn't use myself as a case study only for young people. You can look at the likes of Honorable Clement Jimbo.
Yeah.
He's a young person too. He ran under the youth slot. So he was able to balance communicating with the old dogs and the new dogs. And we worked together to actualize his goal. And that's one win for young persons. And you can see the difference he's been able to make. You can see his evolutionary school of thoughts. You can see some policies he's been able to push out there, youth centered policies. I like to always make noise of one of his bills that had gained international attention, the bill for establishment of technology transfer, which is a system that several other countries are practicing currently. You say, for example, Indonesia as a country told Apple, you can't operate in our country if you don't have a factory here. And then Apple said, okay, we don't want to site a factory, but can we pay you guys XYZ amount? They said no. They started with $100 million. They went to 500 million. Finally, at the end of the day, Apple were able now had to bend to the will of the country to site a $1 billion Apple manufacturing factory
Okay.
there. And so this factory is going to create jobs. So there are several other companies like that which can be influenced by the establishment of the technology transfer bill
Okay.
as proposed by Honorable Clement Jimbo. So you see, when you look at the scores of Honorable Clement Jimbo as a young person who got elected into office, it's also inspiring several other young people to do the same thing too.
Okay. Now let's take our minds back to teaching old dogs new tricks. Now, you see, most times when you get into the social media, that is where you would have more of the youths.
Yes,
Now,
yes.
when you get into the social media, you see youths coming up with lots of wonderful ideas. And sometimes I feel that the youths also feel that the old dogs should understand these new tricks. Now, what really love to balance, because most times if you see the level of advocacy on the social media,
Yes.
you would to me, I feel that the number of youths who are willing and devotedly participating in politics are
Okay.
now increasingly high. I have to use that.
Okay.
Is
So
this really valid
I,
or
let me give you, let's do some numbers that will resonate with us
okay?
very clearly. The last presidential election, we didn't have up to 30 million people vote to elect the president of the Federal Republic. Do you know how many internet users we have in the country? Over 100 million internet users. So 60% or more than 70% of that
Like
number
70% of the
are young
number.
people.
Okay.
So let's say that's 70 million votes. So when you say young people are beginning to get interest, young people are beginning to wish they have interest. Because the first line of interest is to get involved in a political party. Yes. I myself seated here, I'm a member of a political party, and I encourage anybody to join a political party of choice. It may not even have to be mine. I might join yours later in the near future. Who knows? Pick a political party, be a part of, get your voter's card. You know, because sometimes we wish we can effect change, but we are not following due process to effect change. You can't stay on the internet and advocate for things and expect a result. You would slowly be categorized as noise. Over time, you will be categorized as noise because you're putting a lot of sound into vacuum space. You're not directing it into a tune. So
Okay.
let's say I want to construct a melody or a tune. I can't just open my mouth and blow breeze. That's air in vacuum. But if you channel that same air into a trumpet, you'd create a melody, you create a tune. Now, the democratic systems are those, are that is that trumpet that we can voice in through that system to create a melody that can achieve a solution. I'll give you an instance. Sometime last year in June, I joined the war against GMOs in Nigeria.
War
It's
against GM.
GMOs.
What are the
Now,
GMOs? Or
GMOs
what's
is genetically modified organisms.
okay?
These are some crops that have been imposed on Nigerians by Western,
Crops.
yes, Western institutions. These are seeds that are regenerative, are not regenerative, and pose harmful threats to our organs and systems. So, when I joined the war against GMOs last year, sometime around June, I believe either May, June, I had a meeting with the stakeholders, some people who have been in the system, who have been fighting it for some time. And I asked to inquire what are the efforts we've put in so far to be able to tame these particular issues. So they said we've had campaigns, we've had street protests, and we've gone on air, we've spoken of air. I said, so who have you spoken to actually in place of authority to get these things done? And I found out that for the last 20 to almost 30 years, they've not spoken to any authority, or they haven't spoken to the right authority. So I led a delegation to the chairman, House Committee on Agriculture, Honorable Bello Kauji. I led a delegation of over 17 professors across the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and we informed him on the health implications. And we used legislative processes to move a motion for the ban of commercialization of GMOs in Nigeria. And that has been achieved. That has been achieved. So you see, there is a process to getting things done. So young people have to roll their sleeves like Erufai said, and get involved in those systems. So you are not just communicating in a vacuum. So let's say if we have 70 million internet users, inside that 70 million, we have more than 10 to 15 million who actually have voters card. How much that can affect the next election cycle? That's a tremendous swing of votes. And for someone who actually communicates fluently and frequently with young population, it makes it easier for you to now bring in your ideas into the system, because you can't defeat an idea with noise. You understand? You defeat an idea with a superior idea. So you bring a better idea into the system with a population of people who are thinking the right way, and you can easily phase out or find a way to incorporate old and new ideas to forge a better direction going forward for the country.
Now, talking about noise making and especially shouting into the vacuum, the first thing that crossed my mind is the level and number of protests
Oh,
that have been carried out these days. Now,
yes.
the essence of this protest is to pass out a signal to the government, both the federal government and even the state government to some extent, so
Okay.
that some narrative could be changed. Some are about police victimization and some and many others. And to some extent, can you still call that protest a voice into the vacuum?
Okay. So let me ask the question now.
Okay.
Are we still experiencing police brutality
Yes,
currently?
we do.
Was there a protest in that regard?
Why did I even say yes? I think to some extent, it's a yes and no question.
No, the
Yes, in the
statistics
sense
has not
that
proven a significant decline. You understand? Statistics hasn't proven yet a significant decline in police. That you I don't know if you know about, you'll be following the Twitter space. You see what Inibere did with Kadri. Yeah, that's an example. The issue of police brutality is not, cannot be solved by any amount of protest you want to do. These are human beings, not a system committing a crime. Now, the system is not structured enough to hold those persons accountable for committing such crime. I'll give you an example of a policy that we can do in the police sector for like a reform. So let's say in Abak local government, for example, if any crime of police brutality is being reported to your to the states, to the local government chairman or to the state house of assembly, the deputy police officer, the DPO in charge of that district would be fired. Do you think the DPO would allow any of his subordinates to do that? He would warn them every morning and every day. And if any of such case arise, he would personally, because his job is at stake and he's a superior officer, he would fish out whoever is involved. These are some of the things we need to look into. And you cannot do that with protest. Now, am I undermining the place of protest? No. Protest is not the end point. It's not the best we can do. We can use protest as a medium to galvanize more voices to support a cause. And there are several other means of protest rather than hitting the streets, except it gets to the point where we have to. But for a start and for a more constructive approach, I think there are better ways than coming out to protest on a certain matter.
Now, what are these better ways?
I just showed you an example of one which I did.
Okay,
Yes, and I just
okay.
proposed a reform in the police sector. Instead of holding individuals accountable, hold the superiors accountable. You understand? We should create stratas of crime that can be punishable. So, for example, police brutality or police harassment should be punished. The DPO of that particular area should be the one who is being punished. So,
Okay,
if you are the leader of a team and you know that such a punishment is going to come to you, you would put your team in place and you put them in
definitely,
order and ensure that
definitely.
they do the right thing. You understand? So if you say, okay, at some certain level of police harassment, the commissioner of police will be fired. You understand? If you see in a case where police go to a community and attack a community and open fire, you can hold the commissioner for police because such instructions has to come from the DPO's office, and the DPO is responsible to the commissioner. You understand? So we have to create a structure whereby in the police system, where the heads are being held accountable for the people under them. So you see, there is a policy framework that can guide to a lasting solution. You can't stop human beings from being who they are, but you can put regulations that punishes them for expressing the negative aspects of themselves. So that's how policy is supposed. These are the areas in which I believe that young people can, engage democratic and political systems to get them to work for them.
Now, let's balance our communities, our locality, the system we were born to meet. That is our traditions
Yes.
with the contemporary
Oh, the
politics.
traditional systems.
Now, not really the traditional system. Why I'm trying to bring that in is that we were born and bred in a kind of community that we understand that those who are supposed to be in politics, sometimes when we talk about politics, we most times turn our minds towards the secular politics, not even the traditional politics.
Oh, okay.
Politics is politics, even in
Yes, even
church.
in church.
Now, we most times, being that we were bred in a way that it's basically meant for the elders, the youth are supposed to be learning. That's
Okay.
what we were born to see. And to some extent, you see, even sometimes when the youths step out to contest or engage in one or two, they would try to stigmatize them and make them feel they're not old enough to eat where the elders are eating. And sometimes they even come up with an adage: a child that washes his or her hands clean dines with the elders. And as
Yes.
such, the elders are always up there, of which you only have to wash your hands before you be invited
Okay.
to dine with the elders. And at some
Okay.
point, dining with the elders doesn't really balance the fact that after dining with the elders in a meal, you would continue to be dining with the elders.
Ah.
Now, automatically, it means maybe you'll be invited at that point. And after
Yes.
that dinner, you would be either flushed out or
So
be
you're
relegated.
you're saying that there is a disparity
I think
between young and old in the
there
political
is a
system.
disparity from my view.
Okay, I think that one of the reasons why some of such views are prevalent is because very few young people engage the system. I'm just
Very
coming back
few.
from the University of Akwa Ibom State. I had a very constructive conversation with more than three professors at the Faculty of Agriculture.
Okay.
So I met with a member of the committee, the Akwa Ibom State Committee on Agriculture and Food Security, and I was, like you earlier introduced me as an agriculturist, I was proposing to work with my team from ECOWAS and the African Union to see how we can engage the vision of the governor and help him to actualize what he's doing with that committee. So I sat with more than three professors of agriculture, and when I say professors, these are not people that are 50 years old or 60. These are elderly people. So I don't really see. I've worked with more older people, And what I've observed is that just like you said, if you wash your hand, the idea is this: if you make yourself valuable, you would always be on that table. So you don't expect in a conversation where, let's say, for example, stakeholders or maybe elders are having a conversation, they are sitting there to discuss the value they can add to the system. The only reason why you will be invited to sit at that table at every given point in time is if you've proven your value over time. You understand? So I have the pleasure, the privilege of sitting most times with senators, House of Rep members, because I get invited to contribute value. I mean, you shouldn't even be worried about sitting with them. If you can work with your fellow young people to create value, and you're doing something, they would see what you're doing and maybe invite you, and you can decide to go or not to go. I don't think there's anything really interesting about their table that you cannot set up yours. We can have our own table where we discuss values and use it to affect our community. If there is any need to collaborate with them because of their wealth of experience, then we can reach out to them and say, "Oh, let's have this conversation. Let's discuss. Let's see how we can, put together the young minds and the old minds to actualize a school of thoughts and then make it and bring it to reality."
Now let's delve straight into SNYC
Yeah, Southern
and
Nigeria Youth Congress.
Project Sprint. How
Yes.
do this as a young person, because they're bringing that into Akwa Ibom, and you are the that of SNYC, you
Yes.
are the director of
Yes. Special duties and the state
special
chairman.
duties, and you are bringing that to Akwa Ibom, and to
Yes.
some extent, you would go far to extend it to as many places.
Yes.
What is this gospel you are trying to preach?
Well, for SNYC, for Southern Nigeria Youth Congress, Southern Nigeria Youth Congress is the apex youth body in the south, sister
Okay.
only to Arewa Youth, which is the apex youth body in the north. We say we are the apex youth body because we advocate for national issues that affect the south. So we believe in aggregating and working with several other organs, youth organs in the south, to see how we can have a united voice to communicate, to attract issues, to communicate issues of national interest affecting the South to the federal government, and also to attract development projects that would affect not just young people, but communities in southern Nigeria. So, as a state chairman, I believe this is a platform to unite the voices of several other youth groups, including the students. I'm not leaving the students outside of it. I've had several engagements with the student union government across different institutions in the state. I've had the opportunity to interface with several youth groups here in the
Is it
states.
transactional?
No, I don't think there's anything transactional to discuss. I've met with the Akwa Ibom State caucus of the Nigerian Youth Parliaments
Okay.
and several other youth groups like that, and we are putting our heads together to see what can we fashion together as a state that we need to get from the country into the state. There are some things that if your voice are not loud enough, you can't really get the necessary attention to get that across. So that's one of the purpose of the Southern Nigeria Youth
How
Congress.
about Project Sprint? Is it the
Well,
same
Project
thing?
Sprint, Project Sprint is it's my birth child.
Okay.
Project Sprint is a civil society organization I birthed sometime in 2022.
Okay.
Immediately after my election primaries, when I stepped down and I saw that there were very few young people in this space. So Project Sprint is short for Strategic Political Response in National Transformation. Yes,
Please
so
take that again.
yeah, strategic political response and national transformation.
Okay.
So politically, we try to inspire. Generally, we try to inspire young people to be politically inclined and how you can use politics to attract development and solve some issues in your community. So Project Sprint has been very, very much on the forefront of policy advocacy. Like the policy on GMOs, Project Sprint I use was the engine we used
Okay.
to drive the ban on commercialization of GMOs in the
Okay.
country. And data protection, we use Project Sprint. Earlier this year, Project Sprint convened a national youth dialogue on tax reforms. So you know how Governors Forum had a conversation on tax reforms. Several groups have had a conversation on tax reforms. But the people who will be like solely affected by the tax reforms, which are the young people in Nigeria, these reforms would affect us for the next 20, 30 years to come. we they hadn't said anything about the subject matter. So, as the country director for Project Springs, I put together several other youth groups, and I partnered with the Chairman House Committee on Youth in Parliament to hold a national youth dialogue on tax reforms. At the end of that dialogue, we submitted 7 prayers to the Committee on Finance, and then 2 out of 7 prayers were assented and read on the floor of the House, which is a significant progress being made. And we are continually engaging the committee to see how we can, get them to understand the reasons for behind the 5 other prayers and see how we can slowly introduce those other prayers into the tax reforms.
Now, talking about community development before we round up, you can agree with me that majority of the youths are leaving Nigeria, and to some extent, they target for greener pastures.
Yes.
How would that develop the
Oh,
communities?
well, there is a place for diaspora engagements. When one of the countries who are making a lot of money from it is Malaysia, and I think Pakistan is making a lot of money from that also too. Yes. So they have a very huge number of their populations outside, and these people send monies back to their families. These are foreign exchange that you are pumping into your economy. So there is a place for Nigerians who are going outside to country, make money, and then maybe send to their families to help better the economy. But if you say you're living in Nigeria for greener pastures, I mean, you might actually go out there and meet much harsh or worse working conditions there. You would go there and you will find out that you have to get lots of permits to even do anything. Meanwhile, as a Nigerian, your nationality gives you a lot of privilege to do so many things, start up a business, and make some good impacts in the country. We need to understand the economic standpoint of the country right now across different states. There are some states that you can go to, start up a business, and make a lot of money. Some other states you can leverage on the fact that labor cost is cheap, and then cost of raw materials are quite affordable, and you can leverage on exports to the neighboring states in the country and make a lot of money out of it. I just think that we need to expand our economic scope. If you look at Akwa Ibom as a state, very few people, okay, there's a good number of people that are actually beginning to see the export potentials that are hidden in the state.
Yeah.
There's a very very huge food inflation outside of this state in some of the large cities in the country like Lagos State, Port Harcourt, and Abuja. So that also is a call to the state government or the regional government to set up robust transportation networks that would help young people to export what they are able to create here. Big thanks to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for coming up with the initiative for the Lagos Calabar Coastal Highway. The economic potential of that place is almost $3.5 billion a day. Yeah, when actualized at full capacity. The amount of goods and services that would run through that road can go as high as $3.5 billion every day. So we are looking at encouraging and stimulating the minds of young people to create solutions even from where they are, not necessarily causing immigration crisis or putting out a poor image of the country when it comes to immigration to foreign countries out there. I mean, if you're going out there, you should be going with a value you wish to contribute to their system, and then maybe repatriate some funds back to the country and all of that.
Now, good enough. The youths are seen to be the future of.
The youth are not the future, the youth are today. I don't like to look at the youth from a future standpoint. The youths are today into the future. So if you keep saying the youth are the future, the youths who are supposed to be working today will still be waiting for that future when they work. So in my own opinion, I think the youths are today and the future. You understand? So the elders are the experience of the past, while the youths are today
And the
and the
future.
future, not just the future.